person at the top needed a person at the top attitude, especially when that person was the fresh-blood emperor who had purged so many nobles. His father, whom he respected, had taught him that the emperor could never show weakness, but as long as one was human, there were limits to what was possible to endure. Jerkniv screamed in a way he could only do in front of his closest aides. I did ask him to use a spell, but I had to. We needed to know some of what he could do in order to figure out how to combat him. Yet I am the one in the wrong. It is all my fault. That is what everyone and his brother are saying. Jerkniv bit his lip and tore at his hair with both hands. Actually, that was just the beginning. He wanted to scream all the deepest emotions welling up inside him and thrash around. He only just managed to maintain imperial appearances, but he was aware that he had pushed the limits. This seems to be turning into a habit, he thought, as he regained composure. Sorry. I got a bit agitated. The stress lately is so bad, you know. When he glanced down at his hands, he saw a couple of his hairs there. Judging from the portraits, none of his ancestors had thin hair. He thought it was pointless, but he might be the first emperor to go bald. He brushed off his hands in a way that might not alert his two guards. Sometimes sympathy hurt more than insults. Hair issues were precisely that sort of thing. Now that you've seen me like this, I am sure saying this will only cause you trouble, but don't worry about me. There must be a way to handle this. I won't let him have his way with the empire. He put on what he felt was a fearless grin. His two subordinates smiled slightly, but they didn't seem relieved. They must have realized that Jerkniv's remark was little more than consolation. Even Jerkniv himself thought that unless a weapon that could definitively slay undead or a person with amazing powers appeared, it would be impossible. Hence the slain theocracy. It has a longer history than we do. Maybe they have a weapon that can kill undead in a single blow. No, I can keep fighting even if all they bring us is knowledge. Wishing for that was the only option he had left. The carriage drove on. Jerkniv's last hope was aboard. The arena was circular. One section had an entrance. The carriage drove through this entrance. It was also the exit for the handful of people with access to the noble guest box. Aside from that, there was the general admission entrance and the shipping entrance. That made a total of 3 ways in and out. Naturally, the first to disembark were the 2 night bodyguards. After they made sure the area was safe, Jerkniv got out. 5 men were there. They didn't appear to belong near the VIP entrance. Jerkniv could usually guess the price of a piece of art from looking at it, but he couldn't tell the value of the men's equipment. That was because it wasn't the work of art armor worn by the guards of nobles. It was combat gear used by people who had been through battles. Etiquette required the lower status person to introduce themselves first, but some adventurers didn't pay attention to status. These men were that type. Was it really all right for the ruler of the empire to humble himself before an adventurer? Perhaps sensing Jerkniv's conundrum, one of the 5 men spoke. Your Imperial Majesty, Jerkniv Rune Farlord El Nix, it is an honor to meet you. We Ray Argenti, the Adamantite team who will be handling your request. I am the leader of the team, Freywaltz. Thank you for hiring us. His commanding voice boomed. He had a lute on his back and a rapier on his hip. The mail shirt he was wearing had a strange shimmer. All of his gear was giving off a glow. It wasn't merely light reflecting, it was magic. Apparently, they were all first-rate magic items, especially the lute, which was supposedly called Star Symphony. Seeing him so filled with confidence, Jerkniv recalled his former self from several months ago and felt a bit envious. You Ray the greatest adventurer team in the country, so I've heard much about you. The story of how you defeated Radiant Crawler was simply thrilling. So of course, I feel as though I know each of you very well. But in any case, can I get the heroes of the nation to introduce themselves from their own mouths? Then since I am a bard, I'll make the would you cut that out. Hearing that from you gives me goose flesh. The sparkling blade and whatnot, please. Don T.O., my apologies, your Imperial Majesty. I am not from anywhere very respectable, so I don't have much way with words, but please forgive me. The man to the right of Freywaltz took a step forward and bobbed his head. He was small-statured and had his hair cut very short. His mouth was smiling, but his eyes, which were too small for his head, weren't as friendly. He was Kalano Durston, a fixer, which was a thief-type class. Not much was known about the fixer class, so many points were unclear, but they were most likely further underground than thieves, lurking in the darkness more like assassins. When Jerkniv told the slightly bowing man that he didn't need to worry about it, Basswood barked a short laugh. Ha ha. The Emperor has been trained on me, so he'll be fine. Oh, who is this? Lightning of the Four? Are you from the same area? No, probably somewhere else. I come from a dirty back alley, but you ray from somewhere rougher, so it seems. I get different vibes from you. Well, that was rude. Sorry to jump to conclusions. No worries, Dark Cloud. I don't remember introducing myself as Dark Cloud. Arg, this is all your fault. He glared over at Freywaltz. The leader made his lips pouty. If you ray going to give weird nicknames, maybe you should lead. Excuse me, Your Majesty. This is the eyes and ears of our time, Esdea. Next, I'll introduce our warrior. You may be surprised by his appearance, but I can assure you of his abilities. No, the Emperor has no doubt. He looks stronger than me. I am glad to hear such a strong guy say that. The name is Fan Longu. The one who was introduced was a monkey with bright red hair. He stood about 5.5 feet tall. He wore armor that seemed to be made of white animal skins. He had a well-used battle axe on each hip. He was a subhuman, a member of the monkey race. The report noted that he was a warrior-type beastlord. Beastlords harbored spirits of forest animals. This one possessed ape powers. Still, the shock of actually meeting him was quite intense. And though he looked like this, was he stronger than Basswood, the strongest person in Jerknev's party? Fan Longu raised his right hand in greeting. Okay, next is our healer. A bit flustered, Freywaltz introduced the next member. Perhaps he thought Jerknev would be displeased. This time the man on Freywaltz's left took a step forward. Pardon me. The strange staff in his hand made a jangling sound. It was called a priest of Buddhajin's staff. My priest name is Unkei. I believe in Buddhajin. I hope everything will go smoothly. He was clad in strange clothes, but they were more civilized than the Beastlord's outfit. On his head was a big hat, yet again strange, made of woven bamboo grass. He had no hair underneath. If Jerknev didn't know he had shaved, he would have felt compassion for him. The man was so young. He wore combat gear seen only rarely in the Empire. He also wore a cassia. This man was a faith caster, adept at fighting undead. He was a healer, a priest of Buddhajin. Buddhajin was a relatively minor deity. Believers lived to the south. Buddhajin was said to be subordinate to the four gods. Jerknev was slightly embarrassed. He didn't know there was a shrine to Buddhajin in the Empire. Apparently, it was causing trouble. Generally, shrines managed healing magic and set the prices. How should they deal with someone who didn't fit that system, especially if that person was an adamantite plate adventurer? There were no close ties between politics and religion in the Empire. Jerknev felt lucky it didn't involve him. He didn't want more trouble than he already had. Still, he was captivated by their outstanding ability to combat undead when he investigated their feats. Maybe it was necessary to put some pressure on the shrines. First, he would have to see whether the man's powers were truly useful. I see. Then the last one is Powerpon. That's right, Your Majesty. When Freywaltz introduced him, someone even weirder, perhaps the most unusual looking of them all, bowed. Maybe he had acquired the eccentric class of Totem Shaman. His tanned upper body was bare. A mysterious white pattern scrolled across it. You ray not cold. I have a magic item equipped that protects me from temperature fluctuations, so it's no problem at all. Jerknev was inwardly surprised to get such a normal answer. The document had mentioned his strange appearance. It also said he was a decent person. Still, the gap caught him off guard. When he took a closer look, he noticed the man had a fairly nice face. He didn't seem terribly old. Half of Jerknev wanted to know why he had chosen this class. The other half didn't. He took in Argenti. It was a weird team. It was made up of weird members. Only thing they had in common were the feathers decorating their gear. For the Totem Shaman, the feathers were only around his loins. These feathers came from the Argenti bird the team used to keep. The feathers sparkled with a brilliant silver. It seemed like they had been plucked mere moments ago. Understood, gentlemen. Thanks for your help today. Leave everything to us, Your Majesty. You ray in good hands. Hearing that from Freywaltz, Jerknev had to stop himself from wincing. Then he strode on ahead. But could you wait a moment, Your Majesty? Esdea stopped him with a flat voice. We were hired to protect you, so we'd like you to not walk out front if that's all right with you. It's not about what's all right with me. I hired you for that purpose. So if you think that's what I should do, then I'll comply, and that's that. Also, if you ever think these men's abilities would be useful, feel free to use them as you would. Although I would appreciate it if you didn't take them too far away from me. Hui, we've come up in the world, if we get to give orders to members of the Four. But you too, Don T, need to leave the Emperor's side. As long as you follow our instructions and escape or run ahead if something comes up, you ray fine. All right, leader, a song if you please. Got it. Your Majesty, I apologize that Dea's mouth is so rough. I don't mean to repeat myself, but it is nothing to worry about, although it could be a problem in public. Perhaps his feelings got through. Freywaltz bobbed his head. It seemed he would have the man consider the time and place before speaking. Then he sang a song. It was less like a song than a collection of mysterious sounds. Jerkniv could hear it, but he couldn't understand it. The song was only a few seconds long, but its impact remained strong. When it was over, Freywaltz began to move. You could describe it as swaying or slithering, but it was a movement Jerkniv would have thought impossible. Okay, please follow 10 yards behind. The party set off, following Dea's instructions. Jerkniv asked Freywaltz, who was next to him, about the song. What in the world was that? You aren't familiar, Your Majesty? It is a bard skill called an intonation. Some perform them with instruments, but I can get the effects by singing. So that's what it was, Jerkniv murmured, and Freywaltz smiled. Then Jerkniv remembered something he'd been meaning to investigate, but never had the time to. It seemed like a good chance to ask. There is something I want to ask you. Can intonations manipulate people? There is one called suggestion that I think would do it. It has the same effects as the magic spell. Some others like charm person can to some extent as well. Jerkniv exchanged glances with Basswood. I see, is that right? Yes, it must be that. So was it a monster that could use bard abilities? Or, so do you know anything about frog-like monsters? He couldn't say for sure that some monsters were born with that sort of ability. It was important to clarify that first. Frog-like. You mean like giant toads? No, not like that. More intelligent. A monster that walks on 2 legs and can activate something like an intonation instantaneously. Maybe a toadman. A toadman bard would fit those parameters, but I didn't get the feeling toadmen were very accomplished subhumans. Apparently, when a chief-level toadman gets older, he gains the ability to confuse enemies with a special call. Confusion was a bit different from what Jerkniv was thinking. He had read about toadmen in a book before. He felt Demiurge looked quite a bit different from them. He couldn't rule out that he was a variety of a lord, but it seemed more likely that he was something else. It seems like you must be thinking of something else. My apologies, Your Majesty. I don't have enough information. If you can give me any more details, I might be able to come up with the answer. That was just what he was hoping for. Oh. Then I'll give you a detailed description of his appearance. Can you lend me your knowledge? Or could you tell me more about intonations? There couldn't be anyone in the Empire more knowledgeable about them than this adamantite adventurer. Your Majesty, isn't that asking a bit much? That is how a bard makes their living. But he chuckled at Basswood's concern. No, I can talk about my ace move, but it is no problem to teach you the ordinary things. He continued, wouldn't it be better for you to ask the great caster? I am sure he knows more than I do. At the mention of Fluda, Jerkniv endeavored to keep his expression steady. Jerkniv had a gag order out about Fluda's betrayal, so not a word had spread outside. For the time being, he was keeping him on as principal wizard, gradually robbing him of his powers when he wasn't looking and groping for a way to compensate. The size of the hole to fill showed him just how much the Empire benefited from Fluda, but it was too late. He thought, I can rely on that old fellow for everything. It is like doing your homework as a student. Just because you have a great teacher doesn't mean you should wait to ask them the answers. You'll get an earful. A few people laughed at his remark. You're exactly right, Your Majesty. Understood. I was just thinking the payment for this job was too high for what it is. I'll tell you a little about intonations later on. Oh, that would be great. There were multiple box seats at the arena. Wealthy people who donated to the management of the arena used them. High-ranking nobles also used them. And the Emperor did as well. They went straight toward the Emperor's box. Perhaps they had checked the place out ahead of time. Dea proceeded without needing to ask for directions. Soon they came to a point where the door was just around the corner, but Dea held out a palm to stop Jerkniv. There don't seem to be any people around, but I'll go on ahead just in case. Can you all wait here by this corner? He spoke low and didn't wait for an answer before moving quickly down a corridor. Curious, Jerkniv poked his head out and took a look. Dea reached the door without making a sound. He did something, and the door cracked open. It scarcely seemed open at all, but it was enough for the fixer to slip through. He disappeared inside. In less than a minute, the door opened wide. Sda's face appeared. All clear, this room is safe. Everyone moved into the room that had passed the safety check. Jerkniv looked around. It was a bit small, but the elegant furnishings were all of the highest quality. Everything was immaculate, despite the fact that he almost never came here. There was a large opening in the wall of the arena. They had a full view of the scene below. When he glanced down, he saw that everyone in the packed seats was going wild. So many people had come out because a Martial King match had been scheduled at short notice. The king of the arena, the Martial King, was so strong that a proper match couldn't be found for him. For that reason, it had been quite a while since he had fought. The stands were overflowing with people eager to see how he would perform. Certainly, many people admire the power on display, and since we have professional soldiers, the battlefield is another world to civilians. That must be why they were able to enjoy death matches as spectacle. No, I've heard that even some knights enjoy going to the arena. Is it about expressing and liberating your savage nature? While Jerkniv was absent-mindedly pondering those things, Argenti had finished their search of the room. Any sign of any intelligence spells or the like being activated? We found nothing, Your Majesty. Right, you got it. First, it's hard for me to tell if something has been cast or not, so I had them check to see if there were any magic items around, and there weren't any. But there's one thing I want you to remember. That is, I don't have as good of examination skills as a thief. Please don't assume we ray perfectly fine. Although our leader boosted my detection abilities with an intonation, so we ray probably okay. You know how it is. As far as magic, I used a detection spell. There was no sign of anything being cast. I also put up a detection obstruction, so it doesn't seem like we'll have any issues. K struck his staff against the floor, and it jangled refreshingly. Then can I request something else? Is there a spell we can use to detect anyone approaching? Something that shows us they ray there, even if they ray invisible, would be great. Unfortunately, I don't have any spells like that. I am fairly certain our leader does, though. When the ball landed in his court, Freywaltz made an OK sign and left the room. What else? If someone tries to listen in, what kind of countermeasures come to mind? Jerkniv thought frantically about what Aints Ul Gown might be capable of. Frankly, he couldn't imagine the unimaginable. As a result, it was practically impossible to underestimate him. Honestly, I think with all we've done, we'll be fine. You've already got multiple spells protecting you. Yes, right, Your Majesty. I've also cast Obstruct Detection, so I'll be notified immediately if anyone tries to investigate us using magic. Please don't worry. Sdair and Unkay soothed him in turn. They probably thought he was a touch paranoid. Or maybe they thought he was nervous because he sensed an assassin. But he was very curious how the pair would react when he told them they were up against the King of Darkness. Would they understand that no matter how cautious they were, it could never be enough? Or would they say they couldn't do a job like this for so little money? The best thing for him would be if they knew nothing about the King of Darkness and just did their best to handle the job. But though he had restrictions on King of Darkness-related matters in place, it was impossible to keep 60,000 mouths shut. It had to have leaked already. In that case, he heard that the higher the rank of the adventurers, the more regularly they collected information. So there was a good chance these guys already knew how powerful the King of Darkness was. Plus, he didn't like the idea of anyone figuring him out. Having thought all that, Jerkniv smiled vaguely to gloss over it. The pair seemed to think they had convinced him. It looked unlikely that they would say any more. An even larger roar went up from the stands. When he took a look, it seemed the fight between two swordsmen had been decided. In the old days, the loser would be put to death. But now, though people sometimes died during matches, they were never killed after the outcome was decided. The rule was said to have been abolished after a swordsman, who just happened to be saved during a losing streak because he was fun to watch, ended up awakening his abilities and becoming champion. Apparently it was thought there could be more like him. What number Martial King was he? He wasn't as strong as the current king, but he was still something. I need to think of a way to bring powerful people who have no intention of belonging to a nation into my corner. Anyhow, we're done, Your Majesty. He turned around at the sound of Freywaltz's voice. Thanks. Since he was dealing with adamantite plate adventurers, he felt he should probably express a bit more gratitude, but his usual terse appreciation had already slipped out. It was nothing. Then regarding our escort duties, do you mind if we stand by in this room? He had hired them as bodyguards. With that in mind, it was an utterly obvious suggestion, but could he have private talks with them around? There were plenty of pros to getting them involved, but once they learned his aim, there was a risk he would end up making enemies of people he should definitely not make enemies of. Still, they were nothing compared to him. What am I thinking?